There's a lot of talk and it seems confusion surrounding the new mobile phone rules that are coming into play tomorrow, the 25th of March 2022. And so I thought I would talk in this little video about how they came about, why they came about, what law has changed, what the law will be, and what the law was before this law was changed. So first of all, since 2003, there's been a specific offence in the Road Traffic Act, section 41, to use a handheld mobile phone or similar device for the purposes of interactive communication. In other words, making a telephone call, sending a text message, an email, and so on. But this law was brought into focus and brought into question with the case of DPP and Barretto, where Mr. Barretto was using his phone to film the aftermath of a road traffic collision. Mr. Barretto was prosecuted for this offence and originally convicted in the Magistrates' Court, although he appealed this decision to the Crown Court, which agreed with his arguments and quashed his conviction. The DPP appealed this decision to the High Court on the basis that it said that the legislation prohibited all use of a handheld device, and thus Mr. Barretto should have been found guilty. The High Court disagreed. In fact, they agreed with Mr. Barretto on the basis that the legislation did not, in its present form at that time, prevent all use of a handheld mobile device. So bringing us up to the current day and the seriousness with which the government views this offence, the government sought to change the law and has done, and that comes into play tomorrow, which is making these laws much wider to include virtually every use of any handheld device. So I'm going to summarise now what that law entails and how it will apply from tomorrow, the 25th of March. So from tomorrow, you can think of this offence of using a handheld device, not just for making a telephone call and sending a text message, receiving a text message or an email, but also anything from even illuminating the screen or checking the time, checking notifications, unlocking the device, of course, making, receiving, or even rejecting a telephone call or internet-based call, sending, receiving, or uploading an oral or written content, sending, receiving, uploading a photo or a video, utilising a camera, video, or sound recording. So this would have covered the case of Mr. Baretto, so under this new law, he would certainly be found guilty. It also includes drafting any text message, so regardless of whether you send that message, so if you are driving along, composing a text message, even if you haven't yet sent it, that is caught within these new rules. But also if you are accessing any stored data such as documents, books, audio files, photos, videos, films, playlists, notes, any other kind of messages, they are all caught within these new rules. And just to make this as broad as possible, it also includes accessing any app and accessing the internet. So this is just about every use that you could use a handheld device for. They would all now be caught within these new rules and would land you with a fine and penalty points. But two questions that always come up, which I will seek to address now, are what if it's in a cradle and what if I'm using it as a sat-nav? Well, in reverse order, the government is going to release new guidance about using a mobile handheld device but in a cradle as a sat-nav. So leading back to the first question, what if it is in a cradle? Well, the only way to use one of these devices without it being a handheld device for the purposes of these new rules is if it is completely hands-free, which means it would have to be voice activated, and I'm going to come back to an important point in a moment, which means it must be in a fixed cradle and you cannot touch it at any time. And there's a helpful paragraph in the explanatory notes to these new rules at paragraph 7.10, which reads as follows. This instrument will therefore amend Regulation 110 of the Construction and Use Regulations 1986 so that the offence of using a handheld mobile phone or similar device is triggered when a driver holds a mobile phone or similar device and uses it regardless of whether that use involves interactive communication. The instrument will also ensure all mobile phones and similar devices are captured by the offence in Regulation 110. The amended regulation will cover any device which is capable of interactive communication, even if that functionality is not enabled at the time. In other words, even if it is in flight mode, these rules are still engaged. For example, because mobile data is switched off or the device is in flight mode. So the key wording in that explanatory paragraph is these rules are engaged when a driver holds a mobile phone or similar device. So if you are holding this device in any way in your hand, these rules are engaged immediately, regardless of what you are doing with the device, regardless of whether it is actually connected to the internet, and regardless of what you are doing with it. But the bit that I said I was going to come back to is that even if this is in a cradle and you are using voice activation, you must be very careful that any use of this device, even if by voice activation, isn't going to distract you to the extent that you are driving without due care and attention, careless driving, or even dangerous driving, because those are separate and even more serious offences which will still be engaged even if your phone is in a cradle and you are using it in that way. As I said, for using it as a sat-nav while it's in a cradle, there will be explanatory guidance coming out from the government very shortly. And finally, there are 2 exemptions to these rules. One of them is if you are using a handheld mobile phone or other device to make a contactless payment whilst you are stationary, in park, in neutral, at a drive-through by way of example. But an important note is that it doesn't allow you to make any other kind of payment whilst you're in the car, such as over the internet or anything like that. It is a contactless payment at a drive-through whilst you are stopped, stationary, parked, and in neutral. And the conditions that apply, one of which I've just mentioned, which is that the vehicle must be stationary and that the goods or services must be provided or delivered at the time or after the contactless payment has been made. And the second exemption, of course, is a genuine emergency telephone call. So if there is a genuine emergency and you need to pick up your phone to make that emergency call, then that is an exemption under the new rules. So I hope that is a simple enough explanation. You cannot hold your mobile phone to do anything from tomorrow, which is good news because it's one of my pet hates, and yet I see people do it all the time, and I'm sure I will continue to see people doing it from tomorrow. It just means that the police have a very broad on-the-spot fine mechanism, regardless of what you're doing with the phone. No arguments that you are just taking a photograph or changing the music or doing anything else. All of these are now restricted and caught within the new rules, so please just keep your phone in the cradle and don't use it. And if you want my suggestion for what it's worth, I would say don't even bother with voice activation and voice commands, because half the time they don't work and they will distract you, and they might amount to careless or inconsiderate driving or even dangerous driving, depending on the level that you are distracted and what happens as a result of your distraction. So if you need to use your phone for any other purpose other than a sat-nav, contactless payment, or genuine emergency, please just pull over and don't use your phone. So please share this video with someone that you know is guilty of this, you know who they are, and as always, thank you for watching.